Last year, while living in an awful flat with an even worse landlord, I was feeling all kinds of way about photography and about life in general. I felt like I didn't really have an identity anymore, and I felt like I hadn't shot anything interesting in a really long time. Mixed in with our living situation, this had really got me down. Photography was super important to me, and to realise that I hadn't really done anything good for a long time really sucked. In the past, I'd either been always too poor or too anxious to go travelling. And when I was finally ready, lockdown messed with my plans. So in 2023, being in our late 20s, this could have been one of our last chances to go travelling for quite a while. So I managed to cobble together money in some of the most precarious ways possible. And this meant that I could go away for 3 months. And it was while planning this trip that I realised I'm going to have to come up with a plan, because if not, I'm going to end up taking the same old pictures like this. And I mean, it's fine, but I'm not going to do anything interesting with that. And it was this planning that completely saved my photography and changed it for the best. And what's good about it is these steps and rules will work for you whether you're going traveling or you're just living your day-to-day life like a normal person. I genuinely think that this is some of the best advice to get yourself back into a good place with photography, and that's because this is what I actually did, and it's done me so much good. So to start off, I guess one of the things we struggle with the most is trying to find interesting things to photograph in our day-to-day life. We get caught up in work and just getting by, and maybe family or whatever else you've got going on. And we think we maybe have to assign separate days to photograph or something like that. 1 month you might have a few more things on than usual, and then you realize that whole month you've not picked up your camera at all. And it's just sat there on the shelf looking at you like a sad little puppy. But obviously for me, that changed because we went away. And I decided to have my camera on me all the time, for everything. And I know I was traveling, so it's oh, you're in incredible places, but often what I ended up photographing weren't the big landmarks or anything like that shit. It was more the things in between. I guess having the camera on you all the time takes away that element of having to decide, I'm going out to do photography. If you have the camera on you, it's more like I'm a photographer. So that first step of having the camera on me, not feeling pressured to shoot, but being ready to shoot, made a really big impact. I know how simple it sounds, but it just is one of those really important things. I'd gone from obviously leaving my camera to collect dust to taking it up every little street that we went down, or just going to the shop or anything. I had it all the time. And it does mean that those quieter moments that you might not normally think to photograph end up becoming really special sometimes. One of the things that made this super easy for me was the fact that I always had my camera in a sling bag, a bag that sort of goes over your shoulder and across your front. It's really comfortable to wear. You can fit a big SLR in there. I usually had an extra lens and then a couple of rolls of film in the front. You could fit so much in it. It's more than enough. The reason why I like a sling bag is because if you have your camera on a strap, it's not very comfortable and it's very visible and not very safe. If you have it in the bag, it's much more comfortable. You can fit lenses and things like that in there as well. And I can literally grab it out in 5 seconds. As you can see, having my camera on me all the time led to some great photos. The stuff in between where we're just driving, or we're in our Airbnb, or we're just walking out of a bar somewhere. These are the kinds of photos that actually end up being some of my favorites. Now, of course, your day-to-day life might not feel that interesting sometimes, but that's where I want to talk about the next thing. I think we all have those periods in life where we don't really even think about photography for a long time, or we just don't even know what to photograph. And we've all been there, honey. While I was putting this plan together, I looked back at my old work and thought about what I didn't like. I was noticing that a lot of the shots that I took were just pretty lazy. I think I got stuck in a vibe of just sort of going through the motions. You know, you go to a place, you see a thing, you take a picture, blah, blah, blah. It's, you know, boring and predictable. And shit, I wasn't going to be doing that this time. It's hard to really explain it, but what I noticed was missing was kind of the way that I saw the scene. I know that kind of sounds like bullshit, but hear me out. Do you ever find yourself in a location and you're just looking around and you're like, well, I'm here, there's the landmark or whatever, the notable thing that might be the subject, and I'm just going to take a picture of it, boom, there we go. Sometimes it do be like that. But the reality is there are so many different ways to take a picture in that moment. There are so many different ways to capture it. I felt like I owed it to myself to be more curious. And obviously sometimes that led to me just sort of looking around the same location for a long time, looking totally nuts while Katie just kind of stood there. A tale as old as time, I know. I'm talking about seeing a scene and really thinking, could I take this photo from a completely different position? Is there an interesting texture here that I can use, or could I frame this through a broken window or something else that's around me? Or could I use this reflection or whatever it is? It's also kind of helpful to think in terms of, if this was a book or something like that, a photo book, what kind of pictures would I want then? Because you don't just need loads of wide shots of different locations, unless that's specifically your style. You might want little details that actually didn't stand out to you in the first place, but if you were coming to produce a book, you might have wanted them. Thinking in a more broad way like that is a really big game changer. Now, I'm not just talking about doing weird shit for the sake of it. I mean, you know, you see it sometimes you feel guilty of it maybe. What I'm talking about is trying to get into that creative mindset to really think about what is possible in a specific location. For me, that felt super rewarding and started to give me more of a sense of identity. It was just so nice to feel like I was actually being creative in these spots rather than just being like, I'm here, I'm going to take the photo. Everyone will find a new way to shoot something, and that for me is what you want to do. So that's number 2. Think while you're shooting, am I just going through the motions and taking the same old pictures, or am I really thinking about all the different things that are here in this space and what I can do with them? I guess it's a mixture of curiosity and creativity that sort of work together. Sometimes all it takes is going 1 or 2 steps beyond what you would usually do to get to something that is really, really good. And sometimes to get to that point, you really need to polish and hone in on your skills. So if you think that's something you might need, then you should take a look at today's sponsor, Skillshare. Whether you want to learn more about street photography, lighting, or editing, or whatever, Skillshare has got you covered. And it's not just photography. Skillshare has got courses on writing, marketing. It's even got a social media marketing course that's like 12 hours long if you really want to get the most for your money. If you're at the beginning of your journey in film photography, then maybe you want to take Kyle McDougall's film photography course. That looks really good, and I know that he's a class act as well, so I'm sure it'll be great. So whether you want to learn crafts, DIY, languages, whatever it is, Skillshare is the biggest online learning platform for creatives. So if you feel like giving something new a go, or you really want to hone in on the skills that you already have, click the link in the description and the first 500 people will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today, and thanks Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Anyway, when we first went away, there was something that tied all of this together and made the whole process way easier. But first, let me talk about the past. I used to walk the streets a lot. taking photos, and often I'd be just pulling the camera up in the last second as I was reacting to something that was happening right in front of me. I'm sure most of you know how this feels, and pretty often you miss the shot. It kind of felt like photos were happening to me rather than that I was creating them. I was reactive, but never proactive. And then for a while, I kind of just went the other way and thought that I have to just be proactive all the time to predict what was going to happen next, or walk to a certain spot and wait and see what happens. But the truth is, I think you need an equal measure of both. To be ready when a moment happens in front of you, but also to be ready to look at a location or a spot and think, if I wait here for the right amount of time, then maybe something could happen. They're very different ways of shooting, and obviously it depends what kind of photographer you are. But for me, I'm a street photographer / God knows what else, and it was really, really helpful for me to switch on to both modes of shooting. The reason why I'm talking about this is because I see so many photographers that seem to be purely reactive and never seem to switch on to that proactive side of things. If that's you, then you should really try to switch on to a proactive kind of mindset as well as your reactive side. So that could be standing in a particular scene and thinking, okay, this looks good, but it needs something else. Maybe you wait there for a few minutes. Maybe the right subject comes, or a vehicle comes, or something like that. Another thing that you can try and do is, if you're in a busy area or something like that, you might see people that are in the midst of doing something. Take a look at them and think, what could happen in the next 10 seconds? Try to predict what is going to happen in the next 10 seconds. What might they do? Might someone start running? Might someone start making particular gestures that could have been really interesting to capture? If you can start to hone in that kind of side of things, then you could be getting some amazing pictures. Also, something that I think is nice about this is it really makes you hone in on your surroundings a bit more. You're more tuned in to what other people are doing and what they might do in the next 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. So that's number 3, be reactive and proactive. Even a short while into our trip, I was already feeling a proper new lease of life. The feeling of being able to shoot all day if I wanted to, and actually being able to shoot how I wanted to shoot and what I wanted to express was really great. But 3 months is a really long time, and there were definitely points in that trip where I just felt a bit lost and felt like I was just going back through the motions again. And this is where the last and arguably most important thing comes in. Sometimes I'd get to a new city, I'd feel uninspired, and maybe the weather wasn't very good, or just something just didn't feel that exciting that day. You know the feeling. I'd kind of feel like I should just be shooting because I didn't want to waste my opportunity, but I also really didn't feel like it. It's so easy just to go into autopilot, and that is something that I really wanted to be aware of not doing. So I thought, how do I make sure that I get out of autopilot? So I started to collect photos that inspired me, people that I looked up to as photographers, or maybe even some of my own work that I thought most represented what I wanted to achieve. Maybe there were shots with a different perspective, or a really good use of color, or amazing framing, or just something like that. I put these photographs together in a little album on my phone, just so I could keep referring back to them if I was ever feeling a bit lost. But that's not all. I also wrote stuff down. So I wanted to make sure that if I was ever feeling like I didn't know what I was doing, I had these things to refer to, little notes that sort of underpinned my style and what I wanted to achieve. And mine literally looked like this. Different focal lengths, really long with layers. Long exposures show movement. Double exposures, details, out of focus elements in the foreground, etc. Framing, feel it. Don't get me wrong, these are really basic notes, but sometimes all you need is a little reminder just to say, listen, this is what we're doing, and this is what you wanted to do, and this is how you wanted to shoot. rather than just falling back into sort of a more autopilot way of shooting where you're just getting basic stuff. Obviously, if you did this, then I would expect that your notes look completely different, because there'll be different things that you want to achieve and different style that you shoot with. But for me, it was a really big way of grounding myself in, this is how I'm shooting and this is what I'm doing. Once we got back and I finally got a chance to send my film off and really see what I'd actually done, I was bricking it. We'd gone away. This is probably the only chance that I might get to do such a big sort of trip. And if I'd have got bad photos, I would have just felt pretty gutted. It felt like a big opportunity to really get myself back on track as a photographer, to be honest. And thankfully, that's kind of what happened. Now, I'm not saying I'm the dog's bollocks or that I've got the best photos that I could possibly ever have gotten from this European tour. But what I did do was shoot how I actually wanted to shoot. I honed in some skills that I really wanted to polish, and it was almost like the foundations of this is who I am as a photographer, or at least that's what it felt like. Maybe I won't feel like that in a few years, and that's fine. Now, this shit is super helpful, and it just helped me out throughout the whole time and just made sure I was really staying on track. So I put together a sort of PDF for you guys to use for yourselves. Basically, just go down to the link in the description, click on that, and you'll be able to download a PDF. It'll be really helpful, hopefully. It's a nice thing to refer to, because you definitely have those moments where you're walking around and you think, I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyway, as usual, thank you guys so much for watching, supporting, commenting, subscribing. It is so cool that I've actually reached 10,000 subscribers, and every single one of you is bloody great. So it's great. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'm just, onwards and upwards.